Imagine, the sun has just disappeared. There is no house for you to step into, no door to lock, no windows, no fence, no streetlights, no cameras, no phone to call for help. There is only a small fire and darkness. You are sitting among a group of people on a landscape tens of thousands of years ago. Behind the firelight are familiar faces: children, adults, people who hunted with you, people who shared food with you, but only a few meters beyond the circle of light. The world disappears. You can't see the bushes. You can't see the rocks. You have no idea what might be standing there. Then, a sound breaks the silence. The grass moves. Everyone falls silent. One person turns their head. Another reaches for a spear. You stare into the darkness. Nothing. Maybe it was only the wind. Maybe it was a small animal. Or maybe a predator is standing just far enough away that you can't see its eyes. You wait. No more sounds. Eventually, everyone relaxes. But now another problem appears. You're tired. Extremely tired. You've walked many kilometers today, searching for food, carrying firewood, maybe taking part in a hunt. Your body is asking you to do one very simple thing. Close your eyes. But if you close your eyes, you can't watch the darkness. You can't see what's approaching. Your reactions become slower. Your muscles relax. Your awareness of the environment decreases. For the next several hours, one of the most intelligent animals on the planet will voluntarily enter a state of near helplessness, sleep. And this is one of the strangest paradoxes of evolution. If sleep is so dangerous, why do we still have to sleep? Why didn't natural selection simply produce a human capable of functioning both day and night? Because in the prehistoric world, the night was far from empty. It could be the time when other predators became active. Big cats, hyenas, carnivores whose senses were better adapted to darkness than ours. A sleeping person cannot immediately run, cannot accurately throw a stone, cannot detect an ambush from a distance. And if the entire group falls into deep sleep at the same time, in theory, it almost seems like an invitation to anything looking for food. But our ancestors still slept, night after night, generation after generation, and clearly, enough of them survived for us to be here today. So how did they do it? Was someone always awake while everyone else slept? Did they sleep in trees, in caves, around fires? Did adults sleep on the outside while children stayed in the middle? Or did humans develop something even more intelligent? A system in which no one had to stay awake all night. Yet the group was almost never completely unguarded. To answer that question, we have to begin with a strange truth. Humans don't just sleep differently from many other animals. The way we sleep may itself have helped make us human. Why did evolution keep sleep? You spend a very large part of your life asleep. If you live for around 80 years and sleep an average of nearly 8 hours every day, decades of your life will pass while you're asleep. Look at that from a survival perspective. Decades spent not searching for food, not hunting, not looking for a mate, not directly defending territory, not continuously monitoring the environment. It sounds like a terrible waste. And worse, sleep makes you vulnerable. So why does it exist? The simplest answer is because sleep does things the body and brain cannot easily do without. Current research indicates that sleep plays a role in many important processes, including immune regulation, metabolism, neurological function, learning, and memory consolidation. Sleep deprivation doesn't just make you feel tired. Your ability to pay attention declines. Your reaction time changes. Your decision-making may become worse. Your memory is affected. And if sleep deprivation continues, the entire body pays the price. That creates an evolutionary dilemma. Sleeping is dangerous, but not sleeping is dangerous too. A person who forces themselves to stay awake all night to avoid lions may be more alert during the first night, but after several nights, they may become a worse hunter. Their judgment deteriorates. Their reactions become slower. They become more likely to make mistakes. One wrong step while climbing over rocks, one track overlooked, one bad decision during a hunt, one moment of lost concentration while making a tool. Any of these could be dangerous. So evolution couldn't simply delete sleep. Instead, the problem may have been, how do you get the benefits of sleep while reducing the risks of sleeping? And to understand the human solution, We have to return to a time before even Homo sapiens, a time when our distant ancestors may have faced a decision every night: sleep in the trees or sleep on the ground. One of the most dangerous decisions in evolutionary history: night in the tree canopy wasn't completely safe. Snakes could climb. Some cats could climb too. Branches could break. You could fall. But sleeping high above the ground offered one obvious advantage: many large terrestrial predators had a harder time reaching you. Modern primates show us a wide range of sleeping strategies. Some choose specific branches. Some build nests. Some change sleeping locations. Those choices may be related to comfort, temperature, tree structure, and predation risk. Our distant ancestors also had a history of living in trees, but at some point in hominin evolution, life on the ground became increasingly important, and sleeping on the ground created both opportunities and risks. A larger body may have made stable sleep on branches more difficult. Bipedal movement on the ground changed the way we use the landscape. Hominin groups became increasingly dependent on terrestrial resources. But the ground was also where large predators operated. So why sleep there? One important hypothesis involves a change in the way humans slept. Anthropologists have proposed that under certain conditions, sleeping on the ground may have allowed for more efficient sleep than sleeping in unstable positions in trees. Modern humans have a rather unusual sleep pattern compared with many other primates. We tend to sleep for a shorter total duration than some primates, while spending a significant proportion of that time in deep sleep and REM sleep. This has led to hypotheses that the transition to ground sleeping combined with fire and social life may have altered sleep architecture during human evolution. But one thing must be emphasized: we don't have cameras recording a group of Homo erectus sleeping 1 million years ago. Scientists have to construct hypotheses by combining anatomy, primate research, archaeology, ecology, and the behavior of modern human communities. So we cannot say precisely, this was the year our ancestors began sleeping on the ground. The process was almost certainly more complicated than that. But if sleeping on the ground became increasingly common, one thing may have helped change the game: fire. Imagine the difference. Without fire, you lie in darkness. The temperature drops. You struggle to see what is approaching. A carnivore may get very close before you detect it. With fire, you have light, you have warmth, you have smoke. You have a central place for the group to gather around. You can see one another's faces. You can repair tools. You can interact after sunset. And you can create a space that some animals may be more cautious about approaching. Fire didn't make the night completely safe, but it changed the night. And perhaps even more importantly, it changed the group. Because now everyone had a place to gather: children, adults, the elderly, hunters, the injured, all within a relatively small area. And that created a new possibility. You didn't have to detect every danger yourself. Only one person had to notice. A sound, a warning call, one person sitting up, and the entire group could wake. This is the moment when sleep stops being merely an individual behavior. It becomes a collective problem. And researchers have found something particularly fascinating when observing how some hunter-gatherer communities sleep today. Not everyone falls asleep and wakes up at the same time. One person sleeps early, another stays up late, someone wakes in the middle of the night. Older adults may have different sleep rhythms from younger people. A child stirs. Someone tends the fire. Someone gets up to relieve themselves. Then another person wakes. The result is, there may be very little time during the night when everyone is asleep at the same time. And that leads to one of the most fascinating hypotheses about how our ancestors may have survived the darkness. Perhaps they didn't need a single guard to stay awake all night. Perhaps the entire group was the guard. Did the entire group protect one another while they slept? Imagine a group of 20 people. The sun has gone down. The fire is still burning. But not everyone feels sleepy at the same time. An older adult has been dozing since darkness first fell. A younger person is still sitting near the fire. Two others are talking. A child has been asleep for a long time. A mother has just woken up. On the other side of the fire, someone is repairing a tool. An hour later, everything changes. The person repairing the tool lies down. The older adult wakes up. Someone else steps away from the sleeping area, then comes back. No one has been assigned. You have to keep watch from midnight until 2 in the morning. There is no watch schedule, no clock, but the final result may still resemble a system of sentry duty. There is always a chance that someone is awake. This idea is often referred to as the sentinel hypothesis in research on collective sleep. A well-known study of the Hadza people in Tanzania tracked the sleeping patterns of group members. Researchers found that natural differences in sleep timing among individuals made periods when everyone was asleep at the same time extremely rare. In other words, there doesn't necessarily need to be one person assigned to stay awake all night. Differences in chronotype, the tendency to sleep earlier or later, can naturally create a form of collective vigilance. Some people are early birds, others are more like night owls. Younger and older people may also have different sleep rhythms. Current research suggests that this diversity may benefit groups of people sleeping together. But we need to be careful. A study of a modern hunter-gatherer community is not a time machine. We cannot observe the Hadza and say, this is exactly how Homo erectus slept. Modern humans live within specific cultures and environments. So did our ancestors. Still, studies like these reveal a highly plausible mechanism. A group doesn't need every member to have the same sleep cycle. In fact, differences may be an advantage. And think about how strange that is. In the modern world, someone who stays awake until 2 in the morning might be seen as sleeping at the wrong time. An older person who wakes up at 4 in the morning may feel that their sleep cycle has become inconvenient. But in a small group sleeping outdoors, those differences could create something extremely valuable. Coverage. When one person is no longer alert, someone else may still be awake. Not perfectly. It doesn't mean they're constantly watching for predators. But the risk of the entire group being completely unconscious at the same time may be reduced. Return to our night. A sound comes from the bushes. Most people are asleep, but one person is awake. He stops. Listens. Another sound. He doesn't need to know exactly what it is. He only needs to wake the person beside him. The second person sits up, then a third, within seconds. A sleeping group becomes a group of people holding spears. For a predator, that change is enormous. A leopard may be able to attack one sleeping body, but if the sound wakes 10 people, an opportunity becomes a risk. And this reveals an important feature of human survival strategies. Many of our most effective systems don't require any one individual to be perfect. They work because individuals are different. One person hears better, another stays awake later. An older person has more experience, a younger person has strength. One person knows how to maintain the fire, another knows how to read tracks. Differences within a group aren't necessarily weaknesses. They can create abilities that no individual possesses alone. But even a group in which someone is frequently awake still faces a problem. A predator doesn't necessarily have to charge directly into the firelight. It can wait, observe, look for an individual sleeping at the edge. So does where people sleep within the group matter? It may matter enormously. Who sleeps in the center of the circle? Look down at a campsite from above. In the middle is the fire. Around it are people. But are they lying down randomly? Maybe not. In many group living species, spatial position affects predation risk. An individual at the edge is generally more exposed to the outside environment. An individual in the middle is surrounded by other group members. For humans, this raises a particularly important question. Who is most vulnerable while sleeping? Young children. A child cannot fight off a large predator, cannot run as fast as an adult, cannot use a weapon effectively, and human children remain dependent on adults for an exceptionally long time. So, protecting children isn't a secondary task. It is a condition for a genetic lineage to continue. Anthropologists have long emphasized that cooperative childcare and the prolonged dependency of human children play important roles in human societies. In the context of nighttime sleep, sleeping close to caregivers offers many benefits. Warmth, breastfeeding, responding when a child cries, and potentially greater protection from danger. A child sleeping alone at the edge of camp is an easier target. A child sleeping among several adults is completely different. But we need to be careful about creating an overly specific image. There is no evidence allowing us to say that every Paleolithic group always slept in a perfect circle with children positioned exactly in the center. Sleeping arrangements certainly varied according to environment, season, shelter, group size, culture, and threat. But the principle remains powerful. Position can turn a vulnerable body into a difficult target to reach. Imagine a predator approaching the camp. To reach a child sleeping deep inside, it has to get past adults, firelight, smell, noise, perhaps even dogs during later periods of prehistory. Every layer makes the attack more difficult. Humans were doing something we still do today, creating layers of security. Today, outer doors, locks, walls, cameras, alarms. In a prehistoric camp, position, fire, other people, weapons, vigilance. The same principle, multiple layers. If one layer fails, another may still work. But sleeping position wasn't only about predators. It was also about something far more dangerous on a freezing night: temperature. Because sometimes the thing that kills you doesn't have teeth. It makes no sound. It doesn't need to ambush you. It simply takes heat away from your body, little by little. And that may help explain why sleeping close together was once such a powerful survival strategy. When another human body became a heating system, imagine the temperature falling lower than you expected. The wind grows stronger. The fire begins to die down. You're lying on the ground. The ground is cold. The air is cold. Every time you breathe, you lose heat. Your body continues producing heat through metabolism, but heat is constantly escaping into the environment. In a modern room, we solve this problem with insulated walls, blankets, mattresses, heating systems. Prehistoric humans didn't have thermostats, but they had one extremely effective source of heat: other people. The human body constantly produces heat. When several people lie close together, the amount of body surface directly exposed to cold air can be reduced in certain positions, while heat from neighboring bodies helps create a warmer microenvironment. Humans aren't the only animals that do this. Many animals huddle together to reduce heat loss. But in humans, social sleeping could be combined with clothing, animal hides, shelter, and fire. Picture the layers: the ground, a layer of grass or plant material, animal hides, a human body, another body beside it, a covering above, a windbreak, a nearby fire. None of these elements is perfect. But when combined, they create an entirely different environment from lying alone on exposed ground. And infants are perhaps the clearest example of why this matters. Human infants are born with a more limited ability to regulate and protect themselves than adults. They cannot find a warm place on their own, cannot build their own shelter, cannot adjust their own coverings. They depend on caregivers. Close contact with an adult body can help provide warmth and allow the caregiver to respond quickly to the child's needs. In a cold environment, this can become a matter of survival. But sleeping close together creates another advantage. If one person suddenly moves, the people beside them can feel it. If someone sits up, another person may wake. If a child cries, the entire sleeping area may respond. The group becomes a sensory network. One movement spreads to another person. One sound travels through the entire group. Danger doesn't need to wake every person individually. It only needs to wake one link in the chain. But there's still one problem that fire position and body heat cannot solve. When you sleep deeply, the brain tries to separate you from the outside world. If it reacted to every falling leaf, you would never sleep deeply enough. But if it ignored every sound, you might never wake up again. So how does the brain decide which sounds can be ignored and which sounds mean you need to wake up right now? The answer reveals that even while you're asleep, your brain never completely leaves the world. When you sleep but part of your brain is still listening, return to the fire, you've fallen asleep. Your eyes are closed, your muscles are relaxed. The sounds around you gradually blend into the background. The crackling fire, the wind, the person beside you turning over, a child breathing, insects. Your brain doesn't wake you every time they occur. If it did, you would barely be able to sleep. But then, a different sound appears. A branch snaps. Your eyes open. Why? You're asleep. So how can the brain distinguish an ordinary sound from one that deserves attention? The answer is that sleep isn't like switching off a machine. The brain doesn't simply go from on to off. Neural activity continues. The brain moves through different stages of sleep, and its responsiveness to the environment also changes across those stages. Current research indicates that the brain can still process certain kinds of auditory information during sleep, especially when a signal is particularly salient or personally relevant to the sleeper. A very familiar example: someone may sleep through the sound of traffic outside, but wake up when they hear their child crying. They may not react to many random voices, but their own name may receive special processing. This doesn't mean that a sleeping person understands everything happening around them, but the boundary between sleep and awareness isn't completely absolute, and from an evolutionary perspective, that makes a great deal of sense. A brain that is too sensitive would constantly wake you up. You wouldn't receive the benefits of deep sleep. A brain that is too deaf to the environment might fail to detect danger. So the ideal system lies somewhere in between. Ignore enough to sleep, but retain the ability to respond to signals important enough to matter. Imagine that in the prehistoric world. The sound of the fire, familiar. The breathing of the person beside you, familiar. The wind, familiar. But a distant roar, a scream, a sudden violent movement, the person beside you suddenly sitting upright. Signals like these could rapidly change the state of the entire group. One person wakes up. Their movement wakes the person beside them. The second person makes a sound. And only seconds later, many people are awake. This is the important point. Nighttime defense doesn't have to depend entirely on every individual detecting a predator on their own. It can depend on a chain reaction. One person detects the threat. The group responds, like a living alarm system. But there is another phenomenon that makes the story even more interesting. Have you ever slept somewhere completely unfamiliar and felt that your first night wasn't as deep as usual? A hotel, someone else's house, a new room. You notice more sounds. You wake more easily. The next morning, you feel as though you never really slept well. Researchers refer to part of this phenomenon as the first night effect. Some human studies have found that during the first night, in an unfamiliar environment, brain activity during sleep can show a certain degree of asymmetry, with some networks remaining more responsive to external stimuli. This is sometimes popularly described as a kind of night watch performed by the brain. We shouldn't turn this into the claim that half of the human brain is always awake. That isn't accurate. But the phenomenon does show that sleep can adjust according to how familiar an environment is. Now place that into the mobile lifestyle of a hunter-gatherer group. A familiar campsite may allow a greater sense of security. A completely new place has unfamiliar sounds, unfamiliar smells, unfamiliar terrain, unfamiliar predators. If the nervous system maintains a higher level of vigilance under circumstances like these, that could be an advantage. Again, we cannot prove that Paleolithic humans experienced the first night effect in exactly the same way as participants in modern experiments. But the ability of sleep to respond flexibly to the environment gives us an important principle. Humans don't sleep the same way under every circumstance. When we feel safe, we may sleep differently. When we sense danger, sleep may become lighter and more fragmented. And that may have been part of the price of sleeping in a world without locked doors. But even an alert brain isn't enough if a predator is already right beside you. So the next question is, what did our ancestors do to make sure predators couldn't get too close in the first place? Part of the answer may lie in something that transformed almost every aspect of human life: fire. A wall without stone. Imagine the campsite at midnight. Seen from a distance. You don't notice the people first. You see the light. A small orange patch in a world of darkness. At the center, glowing embers. A few flames are still burning. Smoke rises. Sleeping bodies lie around them. If you're human, this is a place of safety. But if you're a predator watching from the darkness, it may be something unpredictable. Fire moves. It gives off heat. It has a smell. It produces smoke. It makes sudden sounds. And surrounding it is a group of creatures capable of throwing stones and using weapons. The control of fire was one of the greatest turning points in hominin history. Exactly when humans began regularly using and controlling fire remains debated. Some sites provide very ancient evidence, but distinguishing natural fire from fire controlled by hominins isn't always simple. Current archaeological evidence indicates that fire use became clearer and more regular over time, although the process may have begun long before Homo sapiens. And once fire became something humans could maintain, the night changed. Not only because of predators, fire provided warmth, allowed food to be cooked, extended activity beyond sunset, created a social center. But for the story of sleep, it also created a buffer zone, not a force field, Not every animal is equally afraid of fire, and a hungry predator or one accustomed to humans might still approach. But fire can increase the cost and uncertainty of entering a camp. For a predator, this becomes a calculation of risk. A sleeping antelope doesn't throw stones. A group of humans around a fire might. If the predator moves closer, one person wakes up. If that person shouts, many people wake up. If many people pick up spears, a potential meal suddenly becomes a potential injury. And for a wild predator, injury can be catastrophic. It has no doctor. An injured leg may prevent it from hunting. An injured eye may reduce its ability to ambush prey. A broken tooth may affect its ability to kill. So the predator doesn't need to understand humans in an abstract sense. It only needs to learn approaching these creatures around the light may not be worth the risk. But for fire to protect you throughout the night, it has to keep burning. And that's the problem. Fire consumes fuel. Wood burns away. Embers cool. Wind can alter the flames. Rain can make things difficult. If everyone is asleep, who tends the fire? Perhaps this was one of the tasks that blended naturally into the group's different waking rhythms. Someone wakes in the middle of the night, adds more wood, rearranges the embers, checks the surroundings, then lies back down. Later, someone else wakes up. No one person has to remain awake from sunset until sunrise. The fire simply cannot be neglected for too long. This turns fire maintenance into a form of cooperation across time. Those who go to sleep early leave the fire to those who stay awake later. Those who stay awake later maintain it for those who rise early. No one owns the entire night, but together the group covers it. And around the firelight, something else can happen. Humans talk, tell stories, share information. Some hypotheses suggest that the period after sunset around a fire may have played an important role in human social life, creating space for conversations and stories different from the practical activities of daytime. Think about that combination. Fire makes the night safer. Night extends social time. More social time creates more opportunities to transmit knowledge. Knowledge helps the group survive more effectively. A technology developed to control heat and light may inadvertently have created an entirely new environment for culture. But fire has one weakness. It has no roof. If it rains, if the wind becomes too strong, if the temperature falls too far, humans need another layer of protection. And that's when we have to ask a question that seems almost too simple. What did prehistoric humans actually sleep on? Because if you imagine them simply lying directly on the cold ground, archaeology suggests that the story may have been far more complex. Your bed is older than you think. Lie down on the ground. No mattress, no blanket, just earth. After a few minutes, you begin to feel everything. Small stones beneath your back, moisture, insects, and most importantly, the cold. The ground can draw heat away from the body through conduction, even when the air is relatively comfortable. A cold surface can still cause significant heat loss. So, what would a group of people who understood their environment do? They would put something in between: grass, leaves, branches, animal hides, plant material, anything that creates distance between the body and the ground. The problem for archaeology is that materials like these decay. Stone survives for hundreds of thousands of years. Grass doesn't. So the softer side of prehistoric life often disappears. We find stone points and unconsciously imagine people sleeping directly beside them on the cave floor. But exceptional discoveries at certain sites have given us rare glimpses into ancient sleeping spaces. At Border Cave in South Africa, researchers have reported evidence of layers of plant material being used as bedding far back in the past. Layers of grass and other vegetation appear to have been arranged in living areas. Some research has also proposed that plants with insect-repelling properties may have been deliberately selected. Archaeological evidence suggests that creating sleeping surfaces from vegetation has an extremely ancient history. Think about what that means. A bed doesn't need a wooden frame, doesn't need springs, doesn't need a mattress. It begins with one simple idea: don't put your body directly on the ground. A layer of dry grass can trap air between plant fibers. That trapped air helps provide insulation. The surface becomes softer. There is less direct contact with the cold earth. Animal hides placed on top can add another layer. And once again, We see the same strategy that appears throughout the entire history of human survival. There is no single perfect solution. There are many small solutions layered together: fire, shelter, bedding, clothing, other bodies, position within the group, vigilance. Each one reduces part of the risk, but those layers of vegetation may also have helped deal with another enemy. An enemy so small that we often overlook it when thinking about predators: mosquitoes, fleas, ticks, insects, parasites. They don't roar, they don't have enormous fangs, but they can ruin sleep, cause injury, spread disease, and choosing certain plants with particular smells or chemical properties may help reduce the presence of insects. One possible explanation for some plant materials discovered at ancient sleeping sites is that they weren't selected only because they were soft. They may have provided other benefits: repelling insects, controlling odors, keeping sleeping surfaces clean. At some sites, even the burning of old bedding layers may have been connected to managing living spaces. If that interpretation is correct, prehistoric humans didn't simply find a place and lie down. They managed their sleeping environment, selected materials, replaced materials, organized space, maintained fire. In other words, they built a sleep technology. And this changes the original question. We asked, how did ancient humans sleep without being killed by predators? But perhaps the answer isn't one single secret. Not just fire, not just caves, not just a guard. It was a system made of many different layers. And the most important layer may have been the thing lying right beside you: another human being. Perhaps human sleep was always a social activity. Imagine something completely ordinary in the modern world. You walk into your bedroom, close the door, turn off the light, and sleep alone. No one beside you. No fire, no sound of people talking, no children, elderly people, or other members of your community lying only a few meters away. For millions of people today, that's completely normal. But if we go far enough back in history, the picture may have looked very different. Our ancestors largely lived in social groups, and if the entire group rested in the same place, sleep took place in an environment surrounded by other people. This matters because a person sleeping alone has to deal with every problem themselves: listen for predators, maintain the fire, detect changes in the weather, respond to danger. But within a group, those costs are distributed. You may be able to sleep more deeply at a certain moment because someone else may still be awake. You may not hear a sound, but the person sleeping near the edge does. You may not notice that the fire is dying, but someone who has just woken up notices. You don't need to be a perfect warning system. You only need to be part of a larger one. This principle appears again and again throughout human evolution. One person cannot know everything, but a group can know more. One person cannot watch every direction, but a group has many pairs of eyes. One person cannot sleep and remain completely vigilant at the same time, but a community can create overlap between sleeping and waking. Anthropologists propose that the social nature of sleep may have been an important part of how humans managed nighttime risk. Not necessarily because our ancestors deliberately designed a security system. It may have emerged naturally from the way the group functioned. One person stays up late. Another wakes early. A child wakes in the middle of the night. A caregiver responds. Older people have different sleep cycles. Someone adds wood to the fire. Someone steps outside and comes back. Small behaviors overlap, and the result is the night is never completely silent. Imagine you're a leopard standing outside the camp. You don't understand human society. You simply observe. One body lies down, but another body is still moving. A little later, that body lies down. But someone else sits up. The fire flares. There are voices. A child cries. Someone walks through the firelight. There is no obvious moment when the entire group becomes a collection of motionless bodies. For a predator, that is an unpredictable target. And unpredictability itself becomes a layer of defense. But this has an even deeper meaning. Perhaps the sense of safety we feel when sleeping near people we trust isn't merely a modern preference. Sleep requires a very particular act. You have to give up control. You have to accept that for a period of time. You won't be monitoring everything. You can't do that if your nervous system believes the environment is too dangerous. That's why stress can disrupt sleep. Unfamiliar sounds, unfamiliar spaces, a sense of insecurity, all of these can make it harder to sleep. One way to understand this is deep sleep is a form of trust in the environment. And for most of human history, the safest environment may not have been a room. It may have been other people. You close your eyes because you know that if something happens, someone else may wake before you do. This may be one of humanity's oldest social exchanges. Tonight, I sleep while you're still awake. Later, you sleep while I'm awake. No need to say it aloud. No contract. No clock. Just living together. But then, several tens of thousands of years ago, another creature began appearing increasingly close to human camps. At first, perhaps, it stood beyond the firelight, eating discarded food, watching, keeping its distance. Over many generations, that relationship changed. And eventually humans gained a nighttime warning system equipped with something we don't have. Better hearing, a better sense of smell, the ability to detect an approaching creature before we notice it ourselves. Dogs, when a predator became the guardian of the camp, night falls again. The fire burns low. Everyone is sleeping. But this time, there is an animal at the edge of the camp. It doesn't look exactly like a wolf, but its ancestors were wolves. Its ears stand upright. Its nose is constantly gathering information. A sound comes from the darkness. The humans don't react. The animal does. Its head rises. It looks toward the sound. If something moves closer, it may growl, bark, move, and that alone may be enough to wake the entire camp. This may have been one of the major benefits of the long relationship between humans and dogs. But exactly how that relationship began is still being studied. Current research indicates that dogs descended from an ancient wolf population, but the timing, location, and precise stages of domestication remain debated. One common hypothesis proposes that wolves, less fearful of humans, may have approached camps to exploit leftover food. Individuals that were too aggressive were driven away. Those able to tolerate human presence could remain closer. Across many generations, a new relationship emerged. But we shouldn't imagine that one day a Paleolithic human looked at a wolf and decided, let's turn it into a dog. Domestication doesn't work that simply. It may have been a long process of selection, mutual adaptation, and behavioral change. And once friendlier canids began living near humans, the benefits could flow in both directions. The animal gained food. Humans may have received warnings, help with hunting, possibly body heat, and later many other social functions. In the story of sleep, their ability to provide warning is especially remarkable. Humans don't see well in the dark. Our sense of smell cannot compete with that of canids. A dog doesn't need to defeat a lion. It only needs to detect it before we do. One bark, and 20 people can wake up. Think about the power of this system. An approaching predator has to pass through multiple layers. First, the smell of humans, then the firelight, then the canid, then the people who are still awake, then the entire group. An ambush becomes increasingly difficult. Perhaps this is one reason the human-dog relationship became so enduring, not only because dogs helped humans hunt, but perhaps because in a world filled with darkness, they helped humans sleep. However, dogs appeared relatively late in the long evolutionary story of hominins. Our more distant ancestors slept for millions of years without them, so the core solution still had to come from humans themselves. And when we look at everything we've seen, a picture begins to emerge. There was no single secret that helped ancient humans survive the night. They had a network of defenses, not one invention, but many layers of protection. Look at the campsite one more time. But this time, don't look at each object separately. Look at the entire system. The location is chosen before darkness falls, perhaps away from obvious animal trails, perhaps with good visibility, perhaps near natural shelter. The sleeping surface isn't necessarily bare earth. Grass, leaves, branches, animal hides, layers of material that provide insulation and comfort. Above, there may be a roof, or a cave, or a windbreak. At the center, fire. Around it, people. The most vulnerable may stay close to caregivers. Individuals have different sleep cycles. Some sleep early, some sleep late, some wake during the night. Weapons are within reach. And in later periods, there may be dogs. No single factor makes predators disappear, but each factor reduces the probability of disaster. Imagine the original risk as an open door. Shelter closes it a little. Fire closes it further. The group closes it further. Vigilance closes it further. Weapons add another layer. Bedding helps the body retain heat and sleep more efficiently. Knowledge of the landscape helps avoid dangerous locations in the first place. In the end, a predator can still attack, but it has to overcome more barriers. This is one of the defining characteristics of human technology. We often don't eliminate danger completely, we manage probability. The same is true today. Seatbelts don't make accidents disappear. Door locks don't make theft disappear. Vaccines don't make every pathogen disappear immediately. Warning systems don't prevent every disaster. They reduce risk. Prehistoric humans also lived in a world of probabilities. No sleeping place was completely safe. No fire offered a 100% guarantee. No lookout could watch every direction. But if each layer reduced the risk even slightly, together they could make an enormous difference. And this is where the original question changes completely. How did ancient humans sleep without being killed by predators? Perhaps the answer isn't they had a guard, nor is it simply they had fire, but rather they turned sleep from an individual vulnerability into an activity protected by the entire community. You sleep, but the group isn't completely asleep. You can't see, but someone else might. You aren't tending the fire, but someone else can add wood. You don't hear the sound, but a body beside you may stir. You don't know where the predator is, but the older members of the group may know where not to make camp. And this is where sleep begins to reveal something much bigger about human evolution. Our ancestors didn't solve vulnerability by eliminating it. They solved it by sharing it. A vulnerable child was protected by adults. An injured person was supported by the group. A sleeping person was protected by those who were awake. Someone who lacked knowledge could learn from someone who had lived long enough to remember. This isn't just a sleep strategy. This is a human strategy. And perhaps that's why the story of a prehistoric night isn't really about predators in the end. It's about something simpler, trust. Because every time your ancestors closed their eyes in a world filled with fangs, they were placing their lives not only in the fire, not only in the spear, but in the people lying beside them. And the next morning, when the sun appeared, they woke up. Together, let's return to that first night. You're still lying beside the fire, but now the darkness doesn't feel the same as it did before. There is still danger out there. Maybe a big cat is moving through the bushes. Maybe hyenas can hear the humans. Maybe there's nothing there at all. But you no longer see the darkness as an endless void. Because between you and the darkness, there are multiple layers of protection. Fire, shelter, a layer of grass beneath your body, animal hides covering you, a spear within reach, and, most importantly, other people. Someone is still awake. On the other side of the fire, an older person has just opened their eyes. A child stirs. Someone pulls another branch into the glowing embers. The flames rise, then grow smaller again. No one stays awake all night. But it may also be very rare for the entire group to completely lose vigilance at the same time. You close your eyes, and here's the strange thing. You're doing one of the most dangerous things an animal can do. You give up your ability to observe. Your reactions slow down. Your awareness of the outside world fades. But you still sleep. Not because the world has become safe, but because safety no longer depends entirely on you. That may have been one of the most important transitions in human history. An individual no longer had to solve every danger alone. The group could do it. And when that happened, the weakness of one individual no longer necessarily became the weakness of the entire community. One person needs to sleep. Someone else is awake. A child cannot protect themselves. An adult lies beside them. One person doesn't know which areas are dangerous. An elder remembers. One person doesn't hear the sound. Someone else does. One person cannot maintain the fire all night. The group can. That's how humans accomplish something we've repeated countless times throughout history. We turn individual limitations into collective strength. And perhaps sleep is one of the most beautiful examples. Because to sleep, You have to trust. Trust that this place is safe enough. Trust that the fire will keep burning. Trust that if something approaches, someone will notice. Trust that when you cannot protect yourself, the others won't leave. Today, we place that trust in different things: walls, doors, locks, lights, alarm systems, police, hospitals. An entire network of society and technology stands between our sleeping bodies and the outside world. We rarely think about it. We simply lie down, turn off the light, and sleep. But that seemingly ordinary act stands on top of an extraordinarily long history. A history of cold nights, sounds in the bushes, fires that had to be kept burning, children who had to be kept warm, predators that had to be detected before they came too close, and humans who had to learn how to depend on one another. Perhaps our ancestors didn't defeat the darkness by eliminating it. They simply created a small circle of light within it, then sat close together, and after that, they closed their eyes and trusted that when the sun rose, they would still be there. Then dawn arrives. You open your eyes. The fire's almost out. The others begin to wake. You survive the night, but your body immediately reminds you that surviving one more night doesn't mean you'll survive the next day. You're hungry, very hungry. And here's the problem: no refrigerator, no canned food, no rice fields, no livestock in a barn, no store. There isn't even any guarantee that today's hunt will succeed. One large animal could feed the entire group. But what if you can't find one? What if it rains for days? What if the herds migrate? What if winter lasts longer? What if you fail to hunt anything for an entire week? We often imagine prehistoric humans eating meat every day. But nature doesn't operate like a supermarket. Food appears seasonally. It moves. It spoils. Other animals eat it. And sometimes it simply disappears. So what happened when ancient humans couldn't find food? How long could they go without eating? What did they eat when the prey disappeared? Insects, roots, tree, bark, bone marrow from old skeletons, food that had already begun to decompose. And could one of humanity's greatest advantages have been our ability to eat things that under normal circumstances we would never choose? That's our next story. How did ancient humans survive when there was nothing to eat? Because the Ice Age wasn't only a battle against the cold. Sometimes the most frightening thing wasn't a roar in the darkness. It was a completely silent morning when you looked out across the landscape ahead and couldn't see a single thing you could eat.